Okay. Good evening, Carolyn and I, on behalf of the Spiritual Life Committee, would like to welcome everyone to our Scholar in Residence Weekend. We are gathered tonight to welcome in Shabbat and to welcome our Scholar in Residence, Rahel Musleah, who will be teaching us this weekend about the history and customs of the Jews of India. Tonight, our scholar will be our guide as we experience Kabbalat Shabbat in the style of the Jewish community of Calcutta. And before we get into Kabbalat Shabbat and the service, I just want to tell you all a little bit about our scholar. Rahel Musleah holds degrees from Columbia University and from the Jewish Theological Seminary. She was born in Calcutta, India, the 7th generation of a Calcutta Jewish family that traces its roots back to 17th century Baghdad. At the age of 6, along with her family, Rahel immigrated to the United States, and the family settled in Philadelphia. So welcome back. There are many facets to Rahel Musleah's professional life. As a journalist, her hundreds of articles have appeared in diverse publications, professional, including but not limited to the New York Times, Hadassah Magazine, Reform Judaism, and Family Circle magazine, to name but a few. She has also written books on Jewish topics for adults and children, as well as publishing a songbook and recording an excellently reviewed CD entitled Hodu, Jewish Rhythms from Baghdad to India. Because of the COVID pandemic, we have been eagerly awaiting this program for almost 2 years now. And Rahel, we are thrilled to have you with us this Shabbat as our scholar.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Thank you so much, Rabbi Ilana, and everybody who's here. I can't tell you how excited I am to be here, because I've also been waiting for that long to get together with you guys. So I hope that you join together with me and sing along at home. You're on mute, so sing as loud as you want whenever you're moved to do so. Are we gonna do the candle lighting first, or am I gonna do the nigun first? The candle lighting first?
Up to you. Why don't we open with a nigun and then we'll light our Shabbat candles.
Okay, so we're gonna start with the melody that you're gonna hear later for Lecha Dodi. So just sing a little on Lulu, and you guys can sing along at home. I'll just repeat it, or somebody will repeat after me. So it goes like this. Lulu, Lulu, Lulu. Try that with me. Lulu, and the second part is very similar. Get the idea. So over to Carolyn.
Now I've got your beautiful melody in my mind. Oh, goodness. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. See, I've got your melody in my head, but I can't get mine in my head. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Amen.
Amen.
So this is,
And we
This
turn
is-
to begin Kabbalat Shabbat together on page, with Psalm 99 on page 34.
so I'm just going to say a couple of words. This has been a year of challenges and unprecedented situations. So usually I say something like, what I'm about to do is going to be unfamiliar to you, but we've had so many challenges that a little few changes in Kabbalat Shabbat seems like a minor thing to deal with. But I do want to say that there are some differences in the way that we do, we do tefillah, we do prayer in the Baghdadi Indian tradition. One of them being we start with Psalm 99. In many traditions, there are 6 Psalms for each day, one for each day of creation. So we're starting with Psalm 99, and then we're adding Psalm 100, which you'll see on the screen, and then Psalm 29, Mizmor LeDavid, and we'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow. And then we'll go into Lecha Dodi, which you've already heard the melody to. Okay, so here we go with Psalm 99.
Page 35 and 34.
Adonai malach yirgezu amim, Yoshev keruvim tanut haaretz, Adonai b'tzion gadol, Veram hu al kol hamim, Yodu shimcha gadol v'nora kadosh hu, Ve'oz melech mishpat ahev, Ata konanta misharim, Nishpat utzaka b'Yaakov ata'asita, Romemu Adonai Eloheinu, V'yishtachavu l'Adon raglav kadosh hu, Moshe ve'Aharon, v'Kohanav, U'Shmuel v'Korei shemo, Korim el Adonai v'hu yanem, ve'amud anan yidaber alehem, Shameru edotav v'chok natan lamo, Adonai Eloheinu ata nitam, el noseh hayita lahem, v'nokem al alilotam, romemu Adonai Eloheinu, v'yishtachavu lehar kodsho, Ikadosh Adonai Eloheinu.
Psalm 100 on our supplement.
Mizmor letoda, hariu l'Adonai kol haaretz, ivdu et Adonai b'simcha, ba'u lefanav virnana, tehu ki Adonai hu Elohim, hu asanu v'la'anachnu amo v'tzon merito, ba'u she'arav b'toda, chatzerotav b'tila, hodu lo baruchu shemo, ki tov Adonai le'olam chasto, ve'ador v'ador emunato.
And we turn to page 37 as we rise in spirit or in body for Psalm 29.
Mizmor LeDavid, Havul Adonai b'nei Elim, Havul Adonai kavod va'od, Havul Adonai kevod shemo, Ishtachavu Adonai behadrat kodesh, Kol Adonai al hamayim, El hakavim Adonai al mayim rabim, Kol Adonai bakoach, Kol Adonai behadar, Kol Adonai shomer arazim, Vayshaber Adonai et arzei לבנון, וירקידם כמו עגל, לבנון וסריון כמו בן רמים, קול אדוני חוצב להבות אש, קול אדוני יכיל מדבר, יכיל אדוני מדבר קדש. קול אדוני יחולל איילות, ויחשוף יערות ופיכלו כולו מרכבות. אדוני למבול ישב, וישב אדוני מלך לעולם. אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום.
We can be seated as we turn to page 41 for Lecha Dodi. But I just want to give us a chance before Rahel leads us in Lecha Dodi. I'm going to go into gallery view for just 1 second because Kabbalat Shabbat ought to begin from time to time with a little bit of a Kabbalat Panim, a greeting of one another's faces. And this is that moment that before we turn to Lecha Dodi, we would turn to one another in our sanctuary and say Shabbat Shalom and just see one another and notice who is with us in our community. I want to share that even beyond this community here on Zoom, there is an additional portion of our community joining together on YouTube Live. And so we just find a friendly face and type on over to the private chat and say a quick Shabbat Shalom or type into the main chat. If it's your first time back with Or Hadash in a while, feel free to, or if you have any guests in your home tonight, share where you're from, who all is with you, and just notice who is making up this terrific and beautiful community. And that throughout this weekend, we're going to all go in and out of this community as we learn together, pray together, sing together, share stories, learn stories, share pieces of ourselves, and learn the incredible Torah of our scholar in residence, Rahel Musleah. And we are just so grateful for this opportunity to all be together tonight. So we turn together to Lecha Dodi on page 41.
Just before we begin, I'm going to go to the end, which has a little coda, so don't be surprised. It has a little Shabbat Menucha, Shabbat Rest, Shabbat Malkita, Shabbat the Queen. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Shamor v'zachor v'dibur echad, Kishmianu el ha-meyuchad, Adonai echad u'shmo echad, L'shem u'tiferet v'litila, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu b'nei lecha, Imekor ha-beracha, Merosh mikedem nesucha, Sof ma'aseh b'machashavat tefila, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Hitoreri, hitoreri, Kivarech u'miori, Uri, uri, shir daberi, Kevod Adonai alayich nivla, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. We're going to go to Yaminu Small. Yaminu Small tifrotzi, Ve'et Adonai taritzi, Al yadish ben partzi, Venitnecha venagila, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Boi v'shalom aterela, Gam besimcha berina u'shala, Tach emunei am segula,
We can be seated as together we turn to page 49 through 51 for Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbat, Psalm 92.
Again, this is a melody that's very repetitive. So if you love the words as I do, it's just nice to put it to this melody. And so just sing along with me when you get it. And if not, just lulu it. Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbat, Tov Lehodot L'Adonai, Uzamer L'Shimcha Elyon, Lehagid Baboker Chastecha, Be'emunatecha Balilot Ale Asor V'ale Navel, Ale Higayon B'chinor, Ki Simchachtani Adonai B'fa'olecha, B'maaseh yadecha Ranen Magad U'ma'asecha Adonai, Me'od Ameku Machshevotecha, Yishbar lo yeda, Uchsir lo yavin etzot bifroch reshaim kemo esef, Vayatzitzu kol pol le'aven nisham edam adeat be'ata marom, Le'olam Adonai, ki hine oivecha, Adonai ki hine oivecha yovedu, Yitparedu kol pol le'aven v'ataren tirem karni, Baloti b'shem ra'anan, v'tabet eini b'shurai, Bakamim alai nereim tishmana oznai, Tzadik katamar yifrach, Ke'erez b'levanon yizkeh shetolim beveit Adonai, V'chatzrat Eloheinu yafrichu, Od yenuhon b'seva, Deshenim v'ra'ananim yihu, Lehagid ki yashar Adonai, Tzuri elav latavo. We go right into the next psalm. Adonai malach geut lavesh, lavesh Adonai oz kitazar, aftikon tevel baltimot, nachon kisacha me'as, Naseu neharot Adonai, Naseu neharot kolam yisu neharot tuchyam, Mikolot ma'im rabim, Adirim mishperei yam, Adir b'marom Adonai, Elotecha nehnu me'ad, Leveit chanav ha'kodesh, Adonai le'orech yamim. So now we have a little addition that hopefully you'll see on your screen in a minute. It is really my favorite part of Kabbalat Shabbat. It's an amalgam of verses from Tehillim, from different parts of the Bible, including Nehemiah. And really, it's very universal as well as personal prayer. So I just, it's really saying that God's sovereignty and glory will reign forever. During the day, God's kindness will command us. His chesed is on us. During the night, God's song is with me. This is the prayer to the God of my life. Kol haneshama tehalel. All breath will praise God and bless your name that is above all blessing and praise. Yimloch Adonai le'olam, Elohai Zion, Ledor vador, Hallelujah. Yavam yitzaveh Adonai chaso, u'balayla shiro imi, Tefillah le'el chayai, Kol haneshama tehalelia, hallelujah. Kol haneshama tehalelia, hallelujah. V'yarech Hashem kevodecha, umrama kol beracha utilah. Hatzi Kaddish.
Shikoch, page 55. Yitka. Are you doing Chatzkash or am I?
Yes, I'll do it.
Oh,
Just
go
so you
ahead.
hear the complete difference, okay?
Go ahead.
Yitkadav, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Ve'ama divrach yirteh v'yamlich malchuteh v'yatzmach b'rkaneh v'karev meshicheh. V'chayecho v'yomecho v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael. Ba'galav v'zman kariv imru amen.
Amen.
Yehei Shemei Rabbah mevarach. Le'olam le'amei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shemei dekudeshah. Leila min kol birchata, shirata, tushbechata, v'nechemata, damiran be'alma, v'imeru, amen.
Shakoach. Thank you for that beautiful Kabbalat Shabbat. We take a breath.
Chazak v'brucha tihi.
We breathe in this moment between weeks of Kabbalat Shabbat, entering into that space, those 25 hours between, and we carry with us a new nusach and kicking off a weekend of new learning, new ritual, new story to weave into the sacred memory of our people, to weave into the story we carry with us of Klal Yisrael, of our Jewish world, in our kishkas. And so we hold those melodies in our ears and our hearts as we rise in spirit or in body for Baruch Hu, page 57. I'm going to go ahead and trade spotlights as we do that with Barbara, with Barbara Weisman, our education director, as soon as Barbara starts her video, as we co-lead this service together. Page 57, we rise in spirit or in body. As we bless the source of life, so we are blessed. As we bless the source of life, so we are blessed. And the blessing gives us strength and makes our vision clear. And the blessing gives us peace and the courage to dare. As we bless the source of life, so we are blessed. Baruch hu et Adonai hamevorach.
Baruch Adonai.
Baruch Adonai hamevorach leolam vaed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bidvaro mariv aravim b'chokhmah poteach sharim uvivuna mishaneh hitim umachalif et hazmanim usader et hachochavim mishotim. Umavir yom umevi laila umavdil ben yom uvein laila Adonai tzvahot shemo elechai v'kayam tamid yimloch aleinu leolam vaed. Baruch atah Adonai hamariv aravim. Want to invite one of our members of the Spiritual Life Committee who's been working with us on this Scholar in Residence weekend, Pat Steinberg, to read for us page 61, our interpretive version of Ahavat Olam. Page 61.
We are loved by an unending love. We are embraced by arms that find us, even when we are hidden from ourselves. We are touched by fingers that soothe us, even when we are too proud for soothing. We are counseled by voices that guide us, even when we are too embittered to hear. We are loved by an unending love. We are supported by hands that uplift us, even in the midst of a fall. We are urged on by eyes that meet us, even when we are too weak for meeting. We are loved by an unending love. Embraced, touched, soothed, and counseled. Ours are the arms, the fingers, the voices. Ours are the hands, the eyes, the smiles. We are loved by an unending love. Blessed are you, beloved one, who loves our people Israel.
Thanks, Pat. Baruch atah Adonai ohev amo Yisrael. Page 65, the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בהם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, והיה אם שמוע תשמעו ותוטה שאנוכי מצווך אתם היום. We continue silently with one of the two biblical selections that follows. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני. When our ancestors beheld these truths, they proclaimed, among all the gods we can name, who can compare to the one beyond naming? Among all the quantities we can label, number, mark, and measure, which compares to the mystery at the heart of reality? That wow. Whether it's that wow at a new piece of learning that feels like it makes all the difference, or that feels like it's recalling something lost long ago, or whether it's a wow at a rainbow after a freak thunderstorm on a Friday afternoon, whether it's a wow at a moment of redemption, renewal, release. Mi chamocha gives voice in liturgical form to that wow. That acknowledgement, that noticing, that presence within the luster of that mystery at the heart of reality. I hand it over to Barbara as we turn to page 79 for Mi Chamocha.
Mi chamocha ba'alim Adonai, mi chamocha mi chamocha neder ba'kodesh nora tehilot osef ele nora tehilot osef ele malchutecha ra'anu vanecha bokeyam lifnei Moshe ze'eli anu ve'amaru ze'eli anu ve'amaru Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed v'ne'emar kifada Adonai et Yaakov u'kol miryat hazak mimenu Baruch Ata Adonai, Gaal Yisrael. Baruch Ata Adonai, Gaal Yisrael. Hey, Rabbi, another thing, you know what else is really amazing?
Oh,
Waiting for a new baby.
that's true. That's true. No baby yet.
That's even better than a rainbow.
But I have a feeling that if I sing Mi Chamocha in the delivery room, Rebecca might disown me.
Yeah. No, actually, no. Anyway.
Page 81, Hashkivenu. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom v'amidenu malkeinu l'chaim.
Ufros aleinu sukat, sukat, shalomecha. Ufros aleinu sukat, sukat, shalomecha.
Ushmor tzveteinu v'oenu l'chaim u'l'shalom me'ata ve'ad olam uvros aleinu sukat shlomecha baruch ata Adonai haporet sukat shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel ve'al Yerushalayim. Page 85, we rise in spirit or in body for Vishamru.
V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, lasot et ha-Shabbat l'dorotam berit olam. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, lasot et ha-Shabbat l'dorotam berit olam. V'ni v'en b'nei Yisrael Oti li'olam, oti li'olam, oti li'olam. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, lasot et ha-Shabbat l'dorotam berit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai, et hashamayim v'et haaretz v'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, lasot et ha-Shabbat l'dorotam berit olam. Uvayom hashvi Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, lasot et ha-Shabbat l'dorotam berit olam.
As we turn to the Amidah, silently recited on Shabbat, we turn to the prayers that we most need to say in our heart, in the language that we need to say them in, with the kavanah, the intention we most need to say them in, the prayers in the Siddur, the English reading, the poetry, the commentary, the prayers within our own hearts. As we reach that Arvit Amidah, that Amidah we say in the evening, we turn from the modality of communal prayer to the modality of individual prayer in community. And the fact that our tradition makes space for that makes all the difference. That space for the prayer that we most need to say tonight. And so we read together on the bottom of page 88, the beautiful pre-prayer to our prayer, our tefillah, by Rabbi Sheila Peltz-Weinberg. Dear God, open the blocked passageways to you, the congealed places. Roll away the heavy stone from the well as your servant Jacob did when he beheld his beloved Rachel. Help us open the doors of trust that have been jammed with hurt and rejection. As you open the blossoms in spring, even as you open the heavens in storm, open us to feel your great, awesome, wonderful presence. The silent Amidah for Shabbat evening begins on page 91. Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha baruch atah. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol yoshvei tevel ve'imeru. Oh, you guys can unmute. Ve'imeru.
Amen.
You sound amazing. And so, a reminder throughout this weekend as we reach parts in our services that are call and responsey, or repeating after me, or responding with amens and things like that. Do not forget, keep your finger near your unmuter, but also keep your finger near your remuter, especially if you have someone sitting next to you that you'd like to talk to during the service. Just saying, because throughout this year we have been embracing that holy cacophony, that we're not quite in sync with one another when we sing together, when we daven together, when we respond amen together, right? Or a barking dog. But, you know, but it's also that way that we remind one another and remind ourselves that we are not sitting in front of a screen alone, that we are doing this synchronously. We are all here at the same time, coming into that same place. And when we say amen, we say it together. And we don't just trust that someone else somewhere across the region is saying amen. We hear it and we share ours with one another. So, ve'imeru.
Amen.
You sound beautiful. And so, we'll turn to our Mishaberach Lecholim, our prayer for healing and wholeness. And we will share names in the chat of those about whom we're thinking and sending our prayers for healing tonight, whether in the chat on YouTube, the chat on Zoom, I'm also going to share the list of brachot mishaberach, of names for a blessing of mishaberach that I have here from our congregation between the two verses of our prayer and song. Mishaberach Avoteinu Makor habracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. And this evening, we're thinking of and sending our hopes and our energy for healing and wholeness to Andrea Abrams Herbert, James Alberts, Roberta Archibald, Arden Bell, Barry Bell, Carol Mueller Bell, Rabbi Deborah Bowen, Bill Conrad, Robin Kupo, Rich Davis, Frankie Deaver, Faye Fishman, Marcy Fish, Brian and Joan Flaherty, Marcia Friend, Eric Gershman, Jonathan Giannini, Jordan Gill Glansberg, Hal Goodman, Barbara Granger, Ed Grimes, Alberta Hall, Cordula Hamish, Chava Hurley, Michelle Kalish, Sharon Cass, Beverly and Howard Kaufman, Fran Kaufman, Richard Krasen, Elsie Lieberstein, Jonathan Loeb, Len McEwen, Robert Mueller, Anthony Nero, Lisa Nicholson, Riley and Thomas Pablo, Stan Pollock, Abby Rosenberg, Mike Rosenberg, Shelley Sanders, Willie Schneer, Bertha Schwartz, Margaret Steiber, Lloyd Suter, Lynn Van Engel, Isabel Vita, Stan Weckstein, Millie Weissman, Karen Wells, Grace Zangwill, Eileen Zeff, Eric Goldberg, Marissa Goldman, Fran Solomon, Bonnie Weinraub,
It's tender.
Patrick Gibson, Shlomo Ben Avram Vachaya, David Ladisky, Rich Davis, Paul Quate and Liz Hemmer, who are both continuing to recover from COVID, Ben Berliner, Zach Latchman, Rosine Paul, Jean Horowitz, Debbie Hoffman, Bobby Olchin, June Powell, Hirsch Melech, Ben Yitzchak Vehendel, Jack Platt, Chris Pollock, Peter Klein, Bob Shern, Maya Lerman, Eric Griffin Shelley, Jenna Young, Neil Berlin, Aviva Perlow, Catherine Clark Weldon, Dorothy Berlin, and Eric Larson. Mishaberach imotenu Mekor habracha leavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen. And we'll turn from our Mishaberach L'cholim, our prayer for healing, to our prayer of celebration, our Kiddush, where this is where everything being mirror image on Zoom gets me. I try to turn this way to get to my Kiddush cup, but it's really on this side. Sorry, everybody. Little slapstick on a Friday night. But our Kiddush, where our cup is filled nearly to the brim with the sweetness of our grape juice or wine, and we raise it in a l'chaim, not only to sanctify the day of Shabbat, but also to sanctify and to shout out anyone and everyone who has something to celebrate. So if you are celebrating Simcha, or if you have a birthday coming up, or if there's a moment that you're marking in your lives, please go ahead and put it into the chat so that we can shout you out for a l'chaim on this Shabbat as we raise our glasses for Kiddush. And so I want to invite everyone to rise in spirit or in body for Kiddush on page 119. We have some shout outs. L'chaim. It is Elisa's birthday on Sunday. Yom Huledet Sameach. A mazel tov to John, whose son Maxwell will be married tomorrow. And a big shout out mazel tov to our Scholar in Residence weekend, our community celebrating our teachers, Madrichim, and Menches on Sunday at the last day of Smile School. Lots of things to raise our glass too, as we join together for Kiddush. Savri Chavirai.
L'chaim.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho b'yahava u'ratzon hinchilanu, zikaron lema'aseh v'reishit, ki hu yom techila למקראי קודש, זכר ליציאת מצרים, כי אלינו קראת ואותנו קידשת לעבודתך, ושבת קודשך באהבה וברצון הנחלתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת לחיים. L'chaim. Oh, I sat down too early. We remain standing in spirit or in body for Aleinu on page 121. Aleinu l'shabeach pladon hakol latetz kedula leotzer breshit shenatan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu v'anachnu korim umishtachavim umodim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu shehu notei shemayim v'yosed haaretz u'moshe ככתוב בתורתך אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. And we can be seated. I want to invite, where did she go? There we go. I want to invite Rahel to join us again in just a moment to lead Mourner's Kaddish, Kaddish Yatom. And in just a moment, I'll also read the list of names of those whom we are remembering this week on the anniversary of their passing, on their date of Yortzeit. And I want to, but first I want to mention that we're inviting Rahel to lead us in Mourner's Kaddish tonight, both because she is saying Kaddish for her father, who she's lost in the past year, actually just about 1 year ago. And also because we are going to be spending this weekend noticing and learning, among other things, about some of the differences between the Ashkenazi and the Sephardi service. And as Reconstructionist Jews, we know a little bit about liturgical changes. That as Judaism is the evolving religious civilization of the Jewish people, so too does our liturgy shift across geography, across time, across communities, whether they are modern innovations in the service or geographical variation. As the Siddur evolved separately in the East and in the West, we notice slightly different versions of our prayers, additional words here, additional phrases there, pieces that we often say in the morning that others say in the evening. We noticed from Yimloch earlier tonight. In Kabbalat Shabbat, we're used to hearing those words on Shabbat morning. And so too in Kaddish Yatom, in Mourner's Kaddish, in Nusach Sfard, in the Sephardi tradition, there are a few extra clauses included in our Mourner's Kaddish. And so just as when people come into the Reconstructionist, into a Reconstructionist synagogue and pick up Siddur Kol HaNeshama for the first time and join us for Kiddush or the Aliyah blessings or Aleinu, as we just chanted, and they find themselves transported into a slightly different liturgical tradition, so too do I want to invite us into that place of experiencing and exploring liturgy, as we break open the distinctions and blur the lines between Ashkenazi and Sephardi, as we change between service leaders and also between nuschaot, not just the melodies, the nusach, but also the nusach, the version of the prayers we are using, as Rahel weaves her beautiful tradition throughout our services this weekend. And so we're going to, as I finish reading the list of yortzites, share the text of the Mourner's Kaddish in the Sephardi tradition. But this week we mark the anniversaries, the passing of Laura Castor, grandmother of Suzanne Castor, Benjamin Dickstein, Bobby Klein, mother of Peggy Mandel, Gertrude Ackerman, mother of Bonnie Ritterman, Clive Morris, father of Bernice Morris, Stuart Modelson, father of Peter Modelson, Michael Oswald, husband of Lisa Oswald, and we're marking Mike's first yortzeit this week. Donald Reif, husband of Eliza Green, Roz Fisher, mother of Stephen Fisher, Herman Pavel, father-in-law of Paula Pavel, Otto Schern, father of Rabbi Vivian Schern, Rosetta Goodkind Klotz, mother of Rob Klotz, Robert Bell, brother of Barry Bell, and Max Joseph, father of Janet Karp. And we're in the final week of Shloshim, the month following, the 30 days following the passing of Louis Quate, uncle of Eileen Cooper Smith, and father of Paul Quate and Sidria Quate. And are there others who are, for whom we're saying Kaddish tonight? Ruth Belzer, wonderful, thank you. Ellen Stewerman, David Raisman. And Rachel, do you want to share your father's name?
Avi Mori, Atar Toshi, Yecheskel Nisi, Yitzchak Sasson, Ufarcha Matzliach.
Thank you. Hold on, I want the other version of the Kaddish. There it is.
Yeah, that's the regular version.
Yes, but I will open the other one. Oops. It doesn't want to open. That's not very nice. There it is. It's always good when your screen does what you want it to do. There we go.
Okay.
Yes. Oh, and I want to invite, hold on one second, sorry. I want to invite mourners and those observing a yortzeit to rise in spirit or in body for Kaddish, along with those whose tradition it is to rise for mourners Kaddish.
Yitkadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Nalmad v'yirach v'yirutei v'yamit malchutei v'yatzmach b'kanei v'yikarev Mashiachei.
Amen.
V'chayechon v'yamechon v'chayed v'chol Beit Yisrael b'agala v'zman kari v'yimru. Amen.
Amen. Shmei Rabbah Mevorach U'Lamei Al-Mayat.
Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yipar v'yitramah v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shmei v'kudesha b'richu. La'ela mikol birchata shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran be'alma v'yimru. Amen.
Amen.
Yesh lamar b'amin shemaya chayim v'sava v'yishua v'nechama shezavar chua gula simcha v'chapara v'revach v'atzala lanu chol amo Yisrael v'yimru. Amen.
Amen.
Shalom b'mrama v'brachama v'yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael v'yimru. Amen.
Amen.
Seems supposed to be the same, Jeffrey.
We say Zichronam Livracha, may their memory be for a blessing. So I want to thank Barbara Weisman for leading the middle of our Mariv service tonight, to our scholar in residence, Rahel Musleah, for leading us in Kabbalat Shabbat. And I want to turn it back over to Carolyn and to Sharon for a few announcements and messages before we continue with our program tonight. Sharon, Carolyn, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. So, Rabbi, in addition to the people that you just thanked, Barbara and Rahel, There are some other people that we particularly want to thank, starting with Ben and Joan Tixty of blessed memory, whose generous endowment in 1983 will continue to enable us at Or Hadash to learn from distinguished scholars across the spectrum of Jewish life and culture for many years to come. Rabbi Alana, we want to thank you for the hours of work you put into organizing and sending emails out to us so that if you had not been with us, we could have done even more than muddle through. We need to always thank Nadine Cantor, who does so much. And we could not have gotten through tonight without Eliza Bowser, our tech maven for the evening. In terms of our announcements, it's hard to be brief because there's so much going on at Or Hadash, even when we're not in the building. For parents out there, I'm noting that Rahel will be presenting to our school children Sunday morning. It is not to be missed. Lots of stuff seemed to happen at Or Hadash on Mondays. June 7th at 7:30, the anti-racism study group is meeting on Zoom. June 14th at 7:30 is the next meeting of the Lay-Led Torah Study Group. And a Monday in July is book club, but I'm mentioning it now because if you would like to attend, I'm going to suggest that you start reading our book, which is Call It Sleep by Henry Roth, which is on a list of one of the 100 best novels in American literature. But there are some very important things happening on Tuesday, so mark your calendar for July 13th, when you can save a life by participating in the blood drive that will be in our sanctuary. And as always, it is being organized by John Shapiro, and we thank him for all those blood drives that he's organized. And lastly, I want to say that while we are happy to all be together on Zoom for this entire weekend, hybrid services are going to be starting again. And so watch HaKasher for the details. And Shabbat Shalom. See you all tomorrow. I hope 9 o'clock for Torah study. Rahel will be co-leading Torah study with Rabbi Alana. And also she will be leading us in the Torah service, so not to be missed.
Beautiful. And as we segue into our program this evening, I want to hand it back over to Rahel to lead us in a closing song, and then to move into our program of music and memory.
Thank you, everybody. We're just going to close with the melody that we learned at the beginning, Lecha Dodi. So please sing together with me. It's all fine. Lo, 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 Should I just go? Okay. So happy again to be here and tell you a little bit about myself and the community that I come from. I'm going to share my screen. So here we go. Just give me a minute. Oops, that's not from the beginning. Okay. So most people, when they hear I'm from India, are surprised. I don't look typically Indian. I only wear a sari occasionally when I'm in India on the Jewish heritage tours that I usually lead twice a year, except for these COVID times, but things are getting better in India. So hopefully we'll be back on the road soon. I lost my lovely British accent when I came to the United States as a child of 6, as you heard. I did grow up in Philadelphia, and lucky for me, not to offend anybody, I did not acquire a Philadelphia accent. I know that it's a hard accent to replicate. I read that in the New York Times, actually, recently. I was born in Calcutta and can trace my family back to 1820 in Calcutta and to the 1600s in Baghdad. That's probably why I don't look too Indian, because my family is originally Baghdadi and Syrian. Why am I showing you a piece of baklava, except for the fact that it's 8 o'clock and maybe it's time for dessert? I like to quote the Israeli-Iraqi writer, Sami Michael, who says that he is like a piece of baklava, one layer is sweeter than the next. And that's how I feel about all the identities that I have as well. So within the past 6 years or so, I've been back to India 9 times, leading Jewish heritage tours. And each time I discover another eye-opening dimension of its richness and vibrant culture. Everybody knows the Taj Mahal, of course, but in addition, there are spectacular sunrises and sunsets, architectural gems, and mirrored palaces. There are all types of transportation, from bicycle rickshaws in Old Delhi, elephants in Rajasthan, and relaxing boat rides in the backwaters of Cochin. It's impossible not to marvel at India's contrasts, its colorful outdoor markets with every variety of fruit and vegetable, side by side with sophisticated malls, luxury hotels, and gourmet restaurants. This is called a thali, which is a large tray with tasting dishes of all different types of curries and rices and breads and things like that. And yes, we sometimes know how to do non-spicy, and there's even pizza. There are also what look like Magen David when you least expect to find them on monuments and even on elephants. Now, you could probably tell that this is not a Jewish Star of David because of the Om sign, which is the union of body, mind, and spirit. But this is actually a good luck sign throughout India for all the religions. So when you're surprised that there's Jewish stuff all over the place, there are a lot of Jewish Stars of David, but there are also ones that are good luck signs, mostly in Hinduism. On top of that, hold on. I want to just share with you a little video to give you a taste of India's sights and sounds.
photoshopping. It's so
Good morning.
Thank you, teacher.
There's never a dull moment in India, and I promise you that's not an exaggeration. You saw the different religions, you saw the different modes of transportation, the animals, the people, it's amazing. It's really an amazing place. And on top of all of that, India's Jewish history is a rare, benevolent history that not too many people know about. This is the Magen David Synagogue in Calcutta. It's magnificent, beautiful building where my father was a rabbi in Calcutta. And this is the synagogue in Cochin, which is on all the every tour of the area, Jewish or not. So when we go to India, we explore India's Jewish history in depth with the communities that remain across the country. Here's a map of India in case you're not familiar with it. Mumbai, that used to be called Bombay in the west, Cochin in the south, Calcutta in the east, and Delhi in the north. So my pictures really only give you a small taste. You have to come and see for yourself. Indians have a motto, guest is God, which means that they welcome guests as if it were a divine responsibility. And that's how Jews were welcomed to India for thousands of years. This is my co-tour guide, Joshua Shapurkar. He is from the Bnei Israel community, and I am from the Baghdadi community. So I'll explain a little bit about the different communities. First, you might know that India's Jewish roots stretch back to biblical times. In the book of, does anybody know? What is the first words here? Vahibi me'achashverosh.
Ooh, I know.
Go ahead, Rabbi.
It's the Megillat Esther.
In the very first line of the Megillah, it says that King Ahasuerus ruled Mehodu ve'ad Kush, from India to Ethiopia. So I really, really love the fact that India is called Hodu, and also Hodu means praise God. I think that's really an amazing double entendre. So the Kochini Jews in the south trace their origins in India to trade in the time of King Solomon. Later, Jews escaping the Inquisition also found refuge there. The Bnei Israel Jews of Bombay claim that their ancestors escaped persecution in the land of Israel around the time of the Maccabees. And the Baghdadi Jews, who set up thriving communities in Bombay and Calcutta and throughout the Orient beginning in the 18th century, have an equally ancient history. We trace our heritage to the Babylonian exile. When following the conquest of Judea, Jews were deported to Babylonia. And one more community in Northeast India, The B'nai Menashe say that they are descendants of the lost tribe of Menashe that was exiled by the Assyrian regime over 2,700 years ago. There are also a couple of other groups in South India that claim descent from the tribe of Ephraim or the tribe of something else. There are a lot of lost tribe stories wandering around India. So as you see, there is no such thing as one kind of Indian Jew. The tolerance that India extended cradled distinct communities and allowed them to flourish both on their own and as part of larger society. India was really a haven for Jews. There was never any indigenous anti-Semitism in any of our communities. We lived alongside our neighbors in harmony and freedom. Gandhi described Hinduism's multicultural tradition in this way. It tells everyone to worship God in his or her own faith or duty, so it lives at peace with all religions. On top of that, there's no conversion in Hinduism, so that makes a big difference. At the height of the Jewish community in the 1940s and 50s, there were probably about 40 or 50,000 Jews in all of India, even though even at that time, that was just a drop in the population bucket. Today, the community is less than 4,000, mostly in Bombay, which still has 8 synagogues. Calcutta has 18 Jews and 3 synagogues. Cochin has maybe 21 Jews. This is amidst a population of now 1.4 billion, mostly Hindus, 150 million Muslims, the second largest Muslim population in the world, following Indonesia, as well as Christians, Parsis, Jains, and Sikhs. So why should we care about Indian Jewish history? Well, now I have to make this 1.4 billion, despite the fact that today Jews make up only 0.0004% of India's population. It's a paradigm for harmonious interfaith living. In addition, Jews were pioneers in many fields and made vast contributions to the fabric of Indian society. There were businessmen and philanthropists like David Sassoon, whose family's imprint is all over the city of Bombay and the Far East. You saw his picture with his family before. That was a picture of the Baghdadi Jews that I showed. And this is his statue in the Sassoon Library in Bombay. Also, the Sassoons and the Khaduris helped welcome Holocaust refugees who fled to Shanghai. There were 4-star generals like Jack Jacob, who changed the course of Southeast Asian history with his life-saving daring during the violent partition of Pakistan that resulted in the creation of Bangladesh in the 1970s. And there are glamorous Bollywood actresses like Sulochana, born Ruby Myers in Calcutta, and my first cousin, twice removed. I'm sure you see the resemblance in those cheeks. So here's another picture of her, and one of our Jewish women was even the first Miss India, Esther Abraham. She was also known as Pramila. There were magicians and mayors and doctors and lawyers, as well as people who lived their middle-class lives quietly, and some who lived below the poverty line. It may be hard to understand why the Jewish communities left India when there was no anti-Semitism. The confluence of Indian independence in 1947 and what happened just a year later, the establishment of the State of Israel, were catalysts for the dramatic decline of the Jewish community. The political unrest, chaos, and social and economic change around the partition of India and Pakistan and the end of British rule caused Indian Jews, especially the Baghdadis who identified with the British, to reevaluate their future in India. And then British and American soldiers stationed in India during World War II also opened up a new perspective on the world. And the Baghdadis and others, some of them married American and British soldiers, left to settle in England, Australia, Canada, and the United States. The Jewish Agency was also very active in India, pressed youth Aliyah, promised a better life in Israel, and sparked the excitement that fueled Aliyah. Most of the Bombay and Cochin communities made Aliyah almost en masse. Today, there are about 90,000 Jews of Indian origin in Israel, and many, many ties now between the two countries, from economic to diplomatic ties. So even though I have grown up mostly in the United States, I still have a deep affinity for India and its people. Maybe the best way to express my feelings is to tell you a story about a visit from my first trip back to India in 1997 with my parents. We took a 5-hour train ride from Calcutta to Madhapur, enshrined in our memories as an idyllic hill town, famous for its pure water and clear air, where numerous members of the Jewish community had spent their vacations. We went to Madhapur partly to search for home. That's more than a symbolic statement. Home is actually the name of the house in Madhapur my father stayed in since his boyhood. In his shirt pocket, he had tucked away a tiny picture of his aunt in front of home's well-kept splendor. It was a grand red brick building with spotless white trim. On each of the 4 columns above the arched doorway was one of the 4 letters, H-O-M-E. What we found was a blackened, sort of pinkish building, and the 4 letters that I was looking for were almost obscured, but I still found them, H-O-M-E. One of the members of the family who then lived in the house shook his head in disbelief when my father showed him the picture from his pocket and told him how far we'd come. The man couldn't fathom that we had come so far seeking a building. He didn't grasp that home meant something much deeper than its name. A lot of my feeling for India as home stems not just from the fact that I was born there, but also from the continued link through customs, traditions, and melodies and stories that my parents perpetuated throughout our years in the United States. So a lot of that is song, as you already heard from Kabbalat Shabbat. I love music. And so this is a song that we actually sing on Motzei Shabbat, but we also use the melody for Ein Keloheinu in the synagogue on Shabbat morning. And it's going to recur throughout the weekend, so I thought I'd give you an introduction to it now. So the melody is very simple. Again, please repeat at home. The words are El Eliyahu, Bizchut Eliyahu, Hanavi Havena. Just as at the end of Shabbat in the Ashkenazic tradition, what's the melody that you are mostly all familiar with? How does it go?
Eliyahu. Is that the one? Hanavi. Eliyahu.
Hold on, Rachel, somehow you became muted.
Okay, you can hear me now? Okay, so the melody goes like this. Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Bizchut Eliyahu, Hanavi Havena. Try that with me again. Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Bizchut Eliyahu, Hanavi Havena. Okay, so this is a recording from my CD. If you were here at the beginning, we played another selection from it. It's called Hodu, Jewish Rhythms from Baghdad to India. And joining me is my friend Alan Eni, who is also from Baghdadi background. Bizchut
בזכות אליהו הנביא הבנו. אליהו, בזכות אליהו הנביא הבנו. בזכות אליהו הנביא הבנה. רב מחדירות כך שיומסנות יפות ובריאות בשר ותראנה. אליהו בזכות אליהו הנביא הבנה. אליהו, בזכות אליהו הנביא הבנה.
כצור מראש צר עיניו ילטוש, יום עיני לקדוש, ישראל תשענה.
מתי תראות ישעיה קורות, לחו חלוצות כולן ותרונה.
המלאך הגואל לפני דן שואל, אנא האל אל אברהם הקרנה. אליהו, בזכות אליהו הנביא הבנה. אליהו, בזכות אליהו הנביא הבנה.
I hope you enjoyed that, and here's how it goes. Very simple. In Kelohenu, in Kelohenu, in Kadonenu, in Kemalkenu, in Kemoshienu, mi Kelohenu, mi Kadonenu, mi Kemalkenu, mi Kemoshienu. We'll finish it tomorrow. So let me take you now to Calcutta, once the capital of the British Raj. Today, a city of 18 million. It is still the center of culture throbbing with life. This is its famous flower market, where we always visit, and it's a very, very colorful, teeming, vibrant place. The first Jew to settle in Calcutta was Shalom Kohen. He was a Syrian businessman who left his native Aleppo in 1790 at the age of 26 and settled in Calcutta in 1798. The Calcutta community grew to have 5 synagogues, 3 large ones, 2 prayer halls, 2 Jewish schools, a Jewish hospital, and more. At its height in the 1940s and 50s, the Jewish population numbered about 5,000. About a tenth of India's total Jewish population. This is a groundbreaking of the Neve Shalom synagogue in the early 1900s. So you can see what the community looked like at that time. Very British with the solar topis and the suits. But still in the middle there is a guy in a very Baghdadi garb. And this is my great-grandfather. With a little boy on his lap who's my great uncle. For some reason, looks like he's wearing a sombrero, but I think I'm mistaken. Anyway, the first Jews who came to Calcutta spoke Judeo-Arabic, an ancient form of Arabic interspersed with some Hebrew just spoken by the Jewish community. So this is my great-grandfather. This is me. I decided to try on my great-grandmother's dress. And so I put it on myself. It's fragile, so I used to bring it with me, but this is what it looks like. And this is my mother's family. My grandfather also came from Baghdad in the early 1900s. And this is my grandmother for whom I'm named, and my mother, this very sulky looking child, and all her siblings. And if you're wondering who this lovely looking little girl is, you might be surprised to know that this is actually my father. It's not my mother, my grandmother, any other female relative. He was born a sickly child. In those days, jaundice was life-threatening. And so to fool the evil spirits who were thought to be all around, he was dressed as a little girl instead of a little boy, dress, ringlets, earrings, and all, until he was about 4 years old. He grew up to be a rabbi, so I guess it didn't hurt him in any way. And this is the family around the table on a visit of my aunt and her 2 children from Israel, where they had already made Aliyah. So we learned Hebrew, the language of prayer. You can see my grandfather's handwriting in the corner here. And we also spoke Hindustani, which is Hindi mixed with some Urdu, to communicate with our neighbors. And some of us learned Bengali. And we also learned English. My first language was English, spoken with a British accent. So this is a page from my great uncle's import-export business. And you can see that the date here is 1842, and his signature at the bottom in Rashi script, because that's what we used for script, not the kind of Hebrew script that we use today. And on this particular day, he imported table lozenges, table vinegar, castor oil, and mixed pickles. So some days were better than other days. And here is his practice handwriting book. I especially love what he is copying here, Be Kind to All. So as the community dispersed in the years following Indian independence, members of my extended family also left for England, Australia, the United States, Canada, and Israel. My father was influenced by a Jewish chaplain stationed in India during World War II named David Seligson. He convinced my father to come to the United States to study. My father was ordained at the Jewish Theological Seminary. He returned to India to lead the community for 12 years, married my mother, and had a family. So I very much love this picture of my parents and their wedding cake, or as I like to say, the wedding cake and my parents. By 1964, there were few Jews left in Calcutta, maybe about 1,000. And my parents hoped that America would be a better place to raise a family. We came to the United States by boat, and our first glimpse of America was the Statue of Liberty. So this is a card I drew on the boat for my father. You can see that there's a very, very accurate depiction. Actually, we came by 2 different ships. One was called the SS Orsova, and the other one was called the SS United States, which you might know is still stationed in Philadelphia, right on the Delaware River. So this is a very accurate depiction of the SS Orsova. I wrote to Darling Daddy, many happy returns of the day, with all my love and kisses from Rahel. On the front, there's another very accurate depiction of the SS United States, just the flags are different. And on the back, I drew a vase with flowers, but I had to label it, these are flowers, because it looked just like another boat. So my father got a job as rabbi of Mikveh Israel, the Spanish and Portuguese synagogue in Philadelphia. My sisters and I went to the Solomon Schechter Day School, where nobody had ever heard of or seen a Jew from India. To me, a Jew from Alabama was more exotic. I stood in front of my class several times, singing the Indian national anthem, the Jana Gana Mana, to prove I really was a little Indian girl and not Pocahontas either. So I sounded sort of like this. Jana Gana Mana Dinayaka Jayo He Bharata Bhagya Vidata Punjab, Sindh, Gujarat, Maharashtra, Dravid, Utkala, Banga, Vindhya, Himachala, Jamuna, Ganga, Uchala, Jaladi, Taranga. Tabashuhuna me jage, Tabashu ashisha mange, Jaye Taba Jaye Gata. Janagana Mangala Dayaka Jayo He Bharata Bhagya Vidata. Jayo He, Jayo He, Jayo He, Jayo 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 He. So that's the national anthem is addressed to God. It depicts India's diversity, yet the unity that's within every Indian. So coming to the United States to sort of prove that we were Indian, we dressed up in Indian costumes for Purim. But of course, when people pinched my cheeks and said in Yiddish, Shena Punim, you know what that means? Pretty face. Well, I had not a clue what they were talking about. That was probably enough proof that I was from a different part of the world. But no matter where we live, Shabbat is always Shabbat. And what would Shabbat be without food? Here again is my great-grandfather choosing a chicken in the marketplace. The shochet, the ritual slaughterer, sat in the marketplace with his chickens, and you went there and chose which one was nice and plump to have for Shabbat. My favorite Shabbat and holiday food is called aloo makala. Aloo means potato in Hindi, and makala means fried in Arabic. The name seems appropriate to me because the community was a mixture of Arabic and Indian influences. More important than that, the potatoes are out of this world. They are so crisp on the outside that in English they're called jumping potatoes. If you didn't pierce them just right with your fork, they jump right off the plate. Inside, they are white and fluffy. You could judge how good a cook somebody was by the quality of their aloo makalas. There are a couple of aloo makala recipes on my website, www.explorejewishindia.com. So most Jewish families had an ayah, a nanny, and a cook who lived on the premises, as well as people who came and went, a dobi to do the laundry, a sweeper to clean the house. So when we first came to the United States, my mother, who had relied on our Indian cook, barely knew how to boil an egg, let alone make aloo makalas. Before we left Calcutta, she had followed the cook around, and she wrote down everything he did in her steno notebook. The first thing she tried to cook in America were mahmusa, an egg and potato dish, beet kata, a sweet and sour curry with dumplings, and of course, aloo makalas. Let me just say that we sampled a lot of burned food in those early days. She asked some of the women in the synagogue to guide her with her cooking. They took her shopping for pots and pans and taught her how to make good Sephardic foods like chopped liver, noodle kugel, brisket, matzah balls. Even though Mikveh Israel is a Sephardic synagogue, many of its members were and still are Ashkenazic. When she turned to members of the Indian Jewish community to try to recreate specialties like chisa musaks, cheese pastries, they gave her directions like, well, you take a little flour, you add a little oil, a little water, no quantities. So she had to experiment on her own. The happy ending is that my mother turned out to be a wonderful cook. She made delicious vegetable curries, chisa musaks, and great aloo makalas for Shabbat. So you already sang Lecha Dodi, and now I just want to take you to some of the synagogues in Calcutta. This is the Beit El Synagogue. Absolutely stunning interior. We'll talk a little bit more about the construction and the features of the synagogue tomorrow. But the synagogues have soaring ceilings and arched columns, stained glass windows, and this is the women's gallery. And then Magen David with its signature steeple, 140 feet high. You might think a steeple is a strange design for a Jewish building, and you'd be right. but it wasn't strange for the Christian architect who had designed it inadvertently had complied with the Talmudic prescription so that the synagogue should tower above all the other buildings around it, at least when it was built, not anymore today. But the first thing I always do when I go to the synagogue is I sit by the plaque with my father's name. He had returned to Calcutta to lead the centenary service in 1985. And then this beautiful entranceway, Zeh Hasha'ar Ladonai Tzadikim Yava'uvo. This is the gateway to God. Righteous people shall enter within. And this is a picture actually taken probably by an American serviceman in the 1950s. You can see that the synagogue is decorated for Simchat Torah with all the curtains hanging from the women's gallery, all the parachot. This is the platform in front of the Heichal, as we call the Ark. And this is the place where weddings and circumcisions would take place, and also the Kohanim would do their duchanim. This is the bima, as we call it, the teba. Again, here is the Heichal. At one time, the synagogue had 75 or 80 Sifrei Torah in the wooden cases covered with silver. It is just an amazing thing. Here is a picture from Simchat Torah when all the Sifrei Torah were taken out of the Heichal and displayed on a special stand built around the perimeter of the sanctuary. So you know I'm not making up the number of Sifrei Torah that there were. So today, Calcutta, the synagogues have been restored and rededicated at a cost of over $1 million, and they stand as beloved and splendid markers of our heritage. But they only have minyanim, usually when there are special occasions or when tour groups like mine come to visit. To welcome Shabbat, we light a tiria. It's a metal holder with glasses, 7 glasses filled with oil and wicks that hangs from the ceiling. And a little bit about our holiday customs. Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews celebrate Rosh Hashanah, which is not that far away, with a mini Seder that includes 7 types of foods from apples and pomegranates for wishes for a sweet new year and a year that's filled with mitzvot, as the pomegranate is filled with seeds. And then there are other foods, leeks, pumpkin, beans, and spinach, because of word plays on their Hebrew names that turn into our wishes that our enemies should be destroyed. Here are some of the blessings printed in Calcutta 100 years ago. And I love this custom so much that I wrote a book called Apples and Pomegranates, a Family Seder for Rosh Hashanah. That is on my website, so people can introduce this ritual at home. This is a picture of our sukkah on our veranda in Calcutta. We decorated the sukkah with fruits and vegetables, glass lanterns, and little ornamental lights that Indians are very, very fond of. What do you think of when you think of Hanukkah? Presents, latkes, dreidels, right? Well, in Calcutta, we didn't have any of those. We do, of course, light an oil Chanukiah. Again, there are rings that hold the glasses with oil and wicks. Here's another typical Baghdadi Chanukiah. And what about for Purim? You probably think of grogers and hamantashen. Well, in Calcutta, we didn't have those either. We stamped our feet at the mention of Haman's name. We gambled on games of backgammon and cards. And we did, of course, read the Megillah. Here I am, dressed as an angel for Purim in Calcutta. And, some things don't change. I'm still that angelic personality. A little about our Pesach customs. We do eat rice on Pesach, yay, but now other people can too. We have a date honey called chalek. For our charoset, that's mixed with ground walnuts. And we have celery leaves instead of parsley, lemon juice instead of salt water, bread instead of matzah. No, I'm just kidding. I have to make sure that you are awake at this point in the program. We do have a special matzah oven where the community made matzah for everybody. It's in the courtyard of the Beit El Synagogue. And here is how the everyday matzah looked. It was sold in these huge baskets and people bought it and hung it up away from chametz in their homes. We even have a different order and of course a different melody to the 4 questions. The pressure's off the youngest because we all chanted together. So you can see that there is Manish Sana here, and then there is the Judeo-Arabic translation after each paragraph, and that's how we recite the whole Seder with both the Hebrew, and if we choose, we can also translate it into the Arabic. So here's how it sounds. I'm going to sing for you 2 verses in Hebrew and 2 verses in my Americanized Judeo-Arabic. So your 3rd question is our first question. Why do we dip twice? Manishtana halayla hazeh mikol haleilot shebechol haleilot en anachnu metavelin afilu פעם אחת והלילה הזה 2 פעמים שבכל הלילות אנחנו אוכלים חמץ ומצה והלילה הזה כולו מצה עד פיקליה לי נחנאת לי חדר ים מרר והלילה כולו מרר עד פיקליה לי נחנאת לי אושר בין קעדין ובין מנתקין ועד לילה כי ליטה מנתקין. The end. We also celebrated life cycle events in auspicious and superstitious ways. We had arranged marriages as well as love marriages. This is a picture of my great aunt Seema and Uncle Charlie. Theirs was a love marriage. They got married in the 1930s. So you can see they look very, very European in their dress. To celebrate the engagement, the groom's family brought flowers and candy to the bride's house, accompanied by the sound of drums and tambourines. The mother-in-law placed the ring on the bride's finger, because if the groom would have placed the ring on her finger, it would have been considered an official betrothal. And then if it were broken for some reason, the couple would need a get, an official bill of divorce. So just a few words, just going to quickly show you some pictures of India's other Baghdadi communities. As you heard before, this is David Sassoon in the Sassoon Library. And this is the first Baghdadi synagogue in Bombay, Magen David. You can see that it resembles the other Baghdadi synagogues in its architecture. And this is the Knesset Eliyahu synagogue, which used to be that light blue color, and everybody who came to visit Bombay, if they went to a synagogue, they would go to this one. But it's since been renovated and repainted this very elegant blue and white, and a gorgeous Victorian green and gold in the interior. This is the Ark. These are the couple of Baghdadi Jews left in Cochin, Queenie Halegua. Sarah Cohen has passed away September 2019, but many people visited her Judaica shop and have souvenirs from there. So now I just want to end the program with a little bit about my return to India for the first time since I had left as a child in 1997. It was 33 years after I left as a child and I went back with my parents. That was a trip in itself. What I remembered of Calcutta was a reconstruction of old photographs and family stories. I had really no idea what we would find. We headed straight to 11 Beaubazar Street, which was home to the Musleah family for decades. My great aunt Rama still lived here. The last of our family left in Calcutta. The sign above the door still said I.S. Musleah, my grandfather's name. That was enough to start me off with goosebumps. It was almost surreal to walk up the winding staircase, to kiss the mezuzah and enter the house I had heard so many stories about. You can still see the sukkah, the frame of the sukkah, which stayed up all year. And this is the go down, the storage pantry that my father sneaked into as a child to savor the secret taste of biscuits and sweets. And this was the window my grandmother looked out in anguish after giving birth to a stillborn child and cried, God, take me. It was jolting to stand in the places the stories had occurred, as if mythology had sprung to life. The mixture of awe and despair I felt was almost overwhelming. There were many poignant moments. I had thought many times about when I visited Magen David, how I would stand still against its granite columns and listen to the Torah trope that was sung for generations here. I would let my voice ring out that Torah trope, and you will hear it tomorrow, so don't miss it. But when I went back in 1997, I had a lot of expectations of that service at Magen David on Shabbat. Walking together to the 6 a.m. service in the dim morning light, unencumbered by my journalist paraphernalia, I finally stopped watching my parents and recording every detail for posterity. We sat in our special box, a group of benches, also called a heichal. My father sat in his grandfather's seat, and I sat in my grandfather's seat. I tried to close my eyes and feel my grandfather's presence. He had died before I was born, so I didn't feel much of anything. I got up and stood behind one of the pillars. I tried to imagine the benches filled with people, and in my mind, I imagined my grandfather in his seat. I thought of a picture that I have of him with a kippah on his head and a siddur in his hand. I pasted my great-grandfather's picture onto his seat, his long beard flowing, and my father's picture as a boy onto his seat. Then, of course, the tears started to roll down my cheeks. All I could do was paste pictures of people, most of whom I had never known, into their appropriate spots in the sacred space that was once so vibrant and alive. There was one compensation. In the heichal, we found a Torah belonging to our family. Most of the Torahs, as I said, were dedicated in memory of relatives. That's why there were so many. So when people left India, they took their personal family Torahs with them. And in fact, we had taken 3 when we left in 1964. But here was a beautiful Torah given to the synagogue in 1888 by my great-great-great-uncle, Yitzchak Sasson Musleah. We were able to take this Torah out of India with us, and I will read from it tomorrow morning. During our visit to the Calcutta Jewish Cemetery, as my father leaned over his parents' graves, I realized with a shock that I was exactly the same age my grandmother had been when she died in childbirth at the age of 39. Was it an accident that I was kissing her grave for the first time at exactly the same age? When we left the cemetery, I hugged my father and asked, "Are you okay?" He answered, "Continuity is a great thing." When I returned home, my 2 daughters, Shira and Shoshana, continued the tradition of dressing up as little Indian girls for Purim. I taught them both the Calcutta Torah and Haftarah tropes for their Benot Mitzvah, and they both read from the beautiful blue Torah. So then a couple of years ago, Shoshana got married. Here's what she grew up to look like. And they are now, how old are they? 28 and 34. And in a minute, I'll show you something else about continuity. But let me see, I think I put it out of order, but okay. Anyway, I made another trip back with my sister. And it was very sad because there was pretty much no minyan, no community, but we stood on the teba and we sang a psalm that entered our hearts. We said goodbye to Auntie Rama. She died 2 months after we came home. But I had asked the house reverted to its owners. It was rented for all those years. And I asked somebody who traveled to India to bring back the sign with my grandfather's name, and it now hangs right above where I'm sitting. So all these moments lie in my heart and my mind whenever I return to Calcutta, usually twice a year. Now I am the guide as we walk past the snack sellers and the chaiwalas and the Jewish sites. No more Jewish students, all Muslim students in the schools, but it's still called the Elias Meyer Free School and Talmud Torah, still called the Jewish Girls' School. And whenever I see the steeple of Magen David poking up from the main road, it's always so exciting, and even more exciting to cross the road, which is an adventure in and of itself against the traffic. And then we enter the quiet oasis of peace. And I feel the souls of my family welcome me and surround me. I've been very, very fortunate to be able to lead services as a community did ask me to lead services, even though the synagogue is originally an Orthodox synagogue. So I always sit in the bench where I sat on my first trip back. I go into the Heichal, I kiss the 2 Sifrei Torah that are left in the Ark. I walk around, I touch everything. Inevitably, I start crying, and then I compose myself. And even though we visit a dozen synagogues throughout India, there is nothing like Magen David. It truly has a soul. So here is the picture. Got muted. When I went back on my first trip back. And the last thing I'm going to play for you, and then one more little anecdote, is the last paragraph of Hallel. The trip that we made back in November 2019, I was very grateful to have Rabbi Jonathan Cohen as one of our participants. He also is from Baghdadi and also B'nai Israel heritage. And he grew up in London and was the Chazan of Bevis Marks, the Spanish-Portuguese synagogue in London. So we knew a lot of the same melodies because I also grew up in the Spanish-Portuguese tradition at Mikveh Israel. So this is Baruch Haba, the last paragraph of Hallel, and of course ends Hodu Ladonai Kitov. That was completely unrehearsed. We just were inspired by being there in the synagogue and just started singing, and that's what happened. So the last memory I'm going to share with you tonight, is my daughter Shoshana accompanied me to India in 2016. It was her first trip to India, and I was thrilled to see India through her eyes. We did all the wonderful things. We went to the Hare Krishna temple. We did yoga in Cochin. We visited the monuments in Delhi. We rode elephants in Rajasthan. We visited the Taj Mahal. I always treasure this kiss. She got into the spirit of dressing up as all the Indian clothing. She bought a sari with her friend Miranda. And then we visited the family landmarks, this Calcutta Jewish Cemetery. This is her great-grandmother's grave. She is named partly for her. And at Magen David in the synagogue, she sat in her grandfather's seat, and I sat in my grandfather's seat, wrapped in her bat mitzvah talit of purple and blue. And the aliyah that she had, prepared to read describes the way the children of Israel carried their knapsacks filled with matzah on their shoulders as they left Egypt. The verse is Misharotam Tzirurot Besimlotam al Shichmam. As she stood before the open Torah, the 8th generation of our family in India, the words she sang resonated beyond their original meaning. Misharotam Tzirurot Besimlotam al Shichmam. We carry our heritage with us. So as I've done with all my programs this year, I'd like to dedicate it to my father, who enabled us to carry on this heritage. And since continuity is a great thing, yay, this is Shoshana's.
Oh, I was hoping we would get a baby picture. It's a brand new baby.
Brand new baby born just last Shabbat at 1:05 a.m. So in 3 hours or so, she will be 1 week old. So indeed, continuity is a great thing. Thank you so very much. If you have any questions, I'll stop my screen share. We will reconvene there.
Well, thank you so much for that incredible presentation. I want to invite people to ask questions. Since we go on to a second page, at least on my Zoom screen, you can try to raise your hand the old-fashioned way, but if you're on the second page, I might not see you. So if you could try to use under reactions at the bottom, your hand raise. Yes, Marilyn, go ahead.
Hi, Shabbat Shalom. I'm sorry, I'm not going to turn my camera on. But thank you, Rahel. That was really interesting. And you have the most beautiful voice.
Thank you.
I'm going to show. I look terrible, but I'll say hello so you can see who's talking. I'm just wondering what is left. I mean, it sounds like there's really not much of a Jewish community left. How are the buildings maintained? Who watches over them? They're just the pictures you showed are beautiful.
As I said, there's no such thing as one kind of Indian Jew, and there's no one answer to that, because each community has its own ways of maintaining the buildings. So there is still a very vibrant community in Bombay, although some people are leaving. The JDC is the most active Jewish agency there. And there is a JCC. They have programs for youth and for seniors. They have a, senior citizens home and old age home. They had a birthright trip. They have, all different kinds of activities. I can't say the same thing for the other communities since there are so few people. However, they did try to get a rabbi in Calcutta a couple of years ago. I don't think he's still there, but the buildings are maintained in Calcutta by trust funds that were set up by the original founders of the synagogues. So, and also the tuition that comes from the Jewish schools that have no Jewish students helps to helps to maintain the synagogues. In Bombay, the Baghdadi synagogues are much grander than the B'nai Israel synagogues. Again, there's a Sassoon trust fund. So some funds come from there, but the renovation of that synagogue, the Knesset Eliyahu synagogue, was done with the participation of like a regional general heritage organization run by Hindu people, Indians, Hindus, not Jews. So it's because it's part of the heritage area of that section of Bombay. And in Cochin, they've also done renovations. There's one synagogue that was quite dilapidated, and the person who is the caretaker of it got donations from all over the world and has made it into a very magnificent building. So as I said, each community is different.
Thank you.
Thanks. I see a hand from Elisa and then Joe.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. I was wondering if you could say anything about how the liturgy differs, like if there's any themes to how it's varied. Do you know what I mean? Like, are there particular ways in which the liturgy went in a different direction? Or...
Yes, that's a great question, and we're going to talk about that tomorrow morning. So come tomorrow morning to this.
I can't come tomorrow morning, but I'll get it from somebody.
Elisa, that's a good point. We are going to be recording both Torah study tomorrow morning and the service and the Havdalah, and they'll be put and we're going to have them as private links that can be sent out to any member of Or Hadash who missed. Or a family member or something like that. So if you have another obligation, a family simcha, work obligation, anything like that, family obligation, please let Nadine know in the office, and hopefully by midweek, by the end of the week, certainly we should have those like processed and ready.
One important thing that I am going to talk about, I'm hearing an echo, is that there's a lot of mysticism that is in the Siddur, in the Sephardic tradition, and there, that still persists. It's got a different kind of mindset between Ashkenazic and Sephardic traditions, and we're going to talk about that and explore that a little bit.
Thanks. Oh, that's not Joe. That's Marianne. Marianne.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you so much. It was so interesting. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what happened to the communities who made Aliyah to Israel, what their experience was like when they got to Israel. Do you have family members there? What their lives are like?
So I don't really have a lot of family in Israel anymore. I did to my aunt and uncle made Aliyah to Palestine in 1945, but they left after 12 years and settled in Australia. So the communities had different experiences, but like the communities that came from all over the Middle East and North Africa, many of them were settled, like the Baghdadis were all settled in transit camps. So their first experience in tent colonies and so on were very, very difficult. But the B'nai Israel community had a very difficult time because there was really discrimination against them. They're number one, have both the Kochinis and the B'nai Israelis are of darker skin, but mostly it stemmed from the fact that because of the history of the community, which we really didn't go into now, but we will go into more tomorrow night. The Orthodox rabbinate didn't want to accept them as Jews. So they had a lot of problems with that and wrote back home to India, like, don't come here, it's really bad. So eventually the prime minister at that time was Levi Eshkol, and he did intervene and they were accepted. But there was a big stink over that, as well it should have been. And the Kochinis had a slightly different problem because they were settled in the south of Israel, because it was thought that the south of Israel was like the south of India, but the south of India is lush and green, and you know what the south of Israel is like. So they had to adapt to a completely different climate, and but they turned out to be great horticulturalists and were among the first to grow flowers in the desert. So there's a lot of obstacles, like Jews who came from, you know, all over the world to Israel had to overcome when they arrived. It was not smooth sailing. But now there are about 90,000 Jews of Indian descent in Israel. There is a museum to the Kochini Jewish heritage in a moshav in the south of Beersheba and Moshav Nevatim, and they are expanding that to a cultural center and a botanical garden for all the Indian Jewish communities.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. And thank you, Rahel. I see a question from Vivian in the chat. She asks, were you raised Orthodox, etc.? I guess wondering a question about, I mean, I know that so I guess to put it out there, using the word Orthodox is, so the movements of Judaism as we think of them are a largely Ashkenazi phenomenon. And so I want to ask Vivian's question, but then also I want to piggyback on that and ask about, so as a Jewish person who's lived in the United States for almost your entire life, but have been raised in the Baghdadi Indian tradition, Jewish tradition, and in a Sephardi tradition also, growing up in a Spanish Portuguese synagogue, and raising Jewish girls in America, I'm wondering about the question of Ashkenormativity, right? That we in the United States, in the American Jewish community, because of the gigantic wave of Ashkenazi Jews who immigrated to this country after a sizable wave of Sephardi Jews, but in a much larger quantity, have you know, we kind of default to Ashkenazi norms. And so I'm wondering about where you find Jewish community, Jewish identity, where you find space for your own Jewish tradition within a broader American Jewish sort of like Ashkenormative context, and how that has impacted the way that you have raised your own children as American Jews, but also as Jews of Baghdadi Indian descent. And I know that's a giant question.
How much time do you have?
The al regal achat, the on one foot answer.
So number one was I raised Orthodox. There is no such thing as reform or conservative among Sephardic Jews traditionally. There is an egalitarian synagogue in Delhi. And you know, the community in Calcutta did allow me to lead the services there. So those are partly because of not so many people there, and partly because the people who are there are not that religious anymore. But I don't have to get into all of that. So I was raised Orthodox, but my father was a conservative rabbi. But you do have to remember that when he came to the JTS in 1947 to 1952, conservative Judaism was not what it is today. There were no women in, you know, women rabbis, cantors, none of that, was an issue. And most people were on the same level of observance. It was mostly a philosophical difference between Orthodox, like Yeshiva University, and JTS. And because Sephardic Judaism in general is much more open-minded, less rigid, I don't mind saying it, than Ashkenazic Judaism, he was very much at home in conservative Judaism. But when we went back to Calcutta, the synagogue was Orthodox. The Mikveh Israel is an Orthodox synagogue. So yes, I was raised Orthodox. However, I went to Salman Schechter, which is a conservative day school. So there's a lot of mixture there, a lot of layering there. As an immigrant to the United States, it was always important, for us to blend in. So I don't think that when we were growing up, we were like a little island of Indian Jewish, Baghdadi Jewish customs and traditions. So at school, I was learning Ashkenazic things myself. At home, we were doing some Indian things, some Spanish and Portuguese things. It was all kind of mixed up. I think that when I myself went to JTS right when the egalitarian movement was beginning, and I was part of the first egalitarian minyan at Matilda Schechter, the residence hall. When I was growing up at Mikveh Israel, it was always like my father raised us. My parents had 3 daughters. So if he wanted to pass on any of what he knew, he had to teach. He taught us. He taught us tropes. He taught us at home. Besides whatever education we had in school, we had further education at home. And so I knew, tropes, even though I wasn't singing them in the synagogue. I was already familiar with all of that. So thank goodness for that. And as far as Ashkenormativity, what can I say? It's always been an uphill battle to feel that, we are so much of the world, Sfardim and Mizrahi Jews, and for a long time, people really didn't know anything about Sephardic Jewry, really only until started to open up in 1992 with the 500th anniversary of the expulsion of Jews from Spain. That really was a turning point when people started to record more Sephardic things, Ladino, and people were more, heard of what Sephardic Jews were at all. So that was definitely a turning point. But still, when my kids went to school, and this is, already 20 years ago, whatever, still when they were taught, this is what we do on Pesach, Yeah. My daughter Shira came home and she said, what are they teaching us? They have no idea of what we do. She was in 4th grade or something, and she's like, they're not talking about anything that we do. Yeah. So from then on, I called the teachers, and it's a long answer, but I think there's more openness now, but it's still, now we're sort of called Jews of color, which I'm not so fond of either, because so what does that mean? Are you Jews of non-color? It doesn't make sense to me. So it's very complicated. I don't think there's really a good solution, but I think that programs like this and people just learning more is a very, very important thing.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm noticing the time. We have a question in the chat about resources, and so it's and maybe after this weekend we can get some wonderful resources together to send out to the rest of the community. So we won't answer it out loud, but we'll answer it in an informational way as this weekend draws to a conclusion and we move into next week. Dan asks, and maybe Carolyn, if you can save that question in the chat for referencing for later, what were the languages in the Passover Haggadah that you shared other than Hebrew, and do you have resources for the lovely melodies that you shared tonight?
Very quickly, Judeo-Arabic and Hebrew. Those were the languages in the Haggadah. And as far as resources, I have a wonderful CD. It's still on my website, and the book Apples and Pomegranates. So if you go to Explore Jewish India, it's in the shop, and I'm happy for you to order it. And
yeah. And actually, our community got a preview of a Seder Rosh Hashanah this year because we were online and not in person at the shul for Erev Rosh Hashanah.
Wow.
We did an online Rosh Hashanah Seder in lieu of Erev Rosh Hashanah services this year.
Wow.
So when you referenced it, I had a big smile on my face.
I saw that, yeah.
Because we had a little preview this year. So Sharon, Carolyn, I want to hand it back over to you for a quick wrap up and any thank yous or anything that are left.
Well, I think Sharon covered most of the thank yous already. And we want to encourage everybody to continue learning with Rahel, starting at 9 o'clock tomorrow for text study. And we will continue at 10 o'clock with services where Rahel will read from that beautiful blue Torah. And we will then have a wonderful program in the evening at 7 or 7:30?
7:30.
7:30, yes. So please continue to join us. And then Rahel will be regaling our students with some wonderful programming starting at 9 with Havdalah on Sunday. So we get to double Havdalah if we come to school.
We do. And Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Thank you, Rahel.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. V'layla tov.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Wonderful. Just wonderful.